Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Joe, he's Nick, and you are entering into the combat zone, where the enemy has only one of four things to say. Take cover, bail out, abandon ship, and we surrender.
There you go.
Okay, I rehearsed that on the way over to the studio tonight, Nick.
I'm not even going to point out that it's I surrender, but that's close enough.
I said, what did I say?
We surrender.
Okay, well, you know, the enemy could be a collective as well.
Hey, if the whole left decides to surrender at once, I'm authorizing a change. Let's call it we surrender.
Well, it has to be we surrender anyway, because when you're talking about the left, you are talking about a collective anyway. And I'm not referring to the Borg.
No, although they're pretty much left too.
Yes.
They all think collectively.
You shall be assimilated.
That's right.
Yes, that's what we should do. Is we should actually use that from now on. They are the Borg.
They are
trying. No, they're trying to assimilate us.
Oh, okay. Is there a clip we can grab for that?
Is there a clip that we can grab for the Borg trying to assimilate us?
Or either that, or we are the
I had
Borg.
your mic turned off, throughout all that whole.
You did. Everybody missed all that.
Well, they
might have heard it through my mic.
They might have heard it through my mic.
Okay, well, you know what?
Well, we cannot go 2 full hours without some kind of a screw up.
Well, it's just that's
okay. That's
live.
Our
shtick, is it not?
That's live. That's what live is all about.
That's right.
I'm not even going to edit out that mistake, Nick. When we go to the podcast, we are not going to edit that out because we
already have people poking fun at us in the chat room.
Okay.
R2D2 says, "Yeah, Joe, you got it without Nick's help. Yay!"
They're not poking fun. They're not poking fun at us. They're poking fun at me.
Well, it's a team effort. So, poke fun at one, you poke fun at all.
Okay, number to call, 844-415-2115 if you want to join into the conversation live, or you can leave a comment in the comment section, and don't forget to refresh that comment section clicking on the refresh link. Now, every so often so that you can update.
I just did that, and R2D2 told us the line, "We are the Borg. Resistance is futile. You shall be assimilated."
Yes, yeah.
So,
well, of course, we all know what happens, right?
Well,
they beat the Borg.
Of course they do. See, that's the great thing about being on the right. You're on the right for a reason, because it's the right side to be on. And that no matter what the odds are, we always win. Truth always wins in the end.
Okay.
With that said,
speaking of truth, or lack thereof.
Yeah.
Okay, Nick, there are certain subjects that will not go away, and they're like when we're thinking to ourselves, what are we going to talk about tonight that's, interesting and that's going to engage our audience? And then we always go back to this stuff. We're going to talk about SNC-Lavelin later on, okay?
We have to.
We cannot not talk about the developments in that whole affair. But before we get to that, the federal government released a report just yesterday. I believe it was yesterday, or it might have been the day before yesterday.
Same day as the carbon tax kicked in, April 1st.
So, right, okay, so it was 2 days ago, because today's the 3rd of April.
That's right.
About how they've decided that Canada is heating up at twice the rate of the rest of the world. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. In case you didn't hear it, okay, brace yourselves. Whatever you do, don't let your kids hear this because they're going to panic. Canada is burning up faster, twice as fast as the rest of the world.
It's terrifying, I will admit. I mean, that would keep me up at night.
That's Nick being terrified.
That's what that is. I lay under my bed at night making that sound, and my wife takes a stick under there and pokes me with it and said, "Knock that off."
Okay,
so
good.
Anyway.
All I can say, Nick, is it's a darn good thing that we're only a half an hour drive from the U.S. border.
Oh, man.
Because when things start to get too hot here, all we got to do is pack up the equipment, head down to Ogdensburg, New York, and set up shop right there.
That's right. But think
about if you want to go just an hour or about 45 minutes further southwest, you can always hit Watertown.
Right.
where you have your choice of hotel and Cracker Barrel restaurant.
There you go.
So you could set up shop at Cracker Barrel restaurant, buy one of their rocking chairs, and
Stay there till the fall.
and we could probably, I stand to be corrected on this, but we might actually be able to smoke some cigars on the veranda.
You know what else? We could probably claim environmental refugee status
That's a great idea.
and make them
I
pay
hadn't
for the
thought
hotel
of that.
room. That's right.
There's our ticket in. No, you don't need a green card anymore.
No, you just say, look, we're fleeing the environment. We're refugees. We can't live here anymore.
Although that would give new meaning to the word green card, right?
Yeah, I want my green card. Make sure it's made out of hemp.
So I'm not really sure how this works. Okay, I mean, I know we've had these discussions before, and some of the guys that have come into our chat room have been, defending the alleged science behind all of this stuff. But yeah, I think they said that Canada has heated up. I don't know how many fractions of a degree or something, and the rest of the world is, half of that. So I don't get it. I mean, where do you draw? Like at the 49th parallel? I mean, that's the joke, right? At the 49th parallel, does the rate of heating all of the sudden change? Does it drop by 50%? That's what I want to know.
Well, okay, there's a relevant argument, a relevant chapter here. Yeah, it might as well be a chapter. It's a paragraph. And it reads this way. You would think after the number of hours I've got speaking into a microphone, I would know I need to speak into the microphone. The Canadian Arctic has been hit even harder with a 2.3 C increase, creating a risk that by the middle of the century, now I want you to pay attention to this next sentence, for those of you listening, because this is calamitous beyond belief, okay? That by the middle of the next century, most marine regions in the Canadian North will be ice-free for at least an entire month at a time. Now think about that. That means that you would have open waters in places like Iqaluit. One of the problems with living in Iqaluit or anywhere in the north is getting supplies up there because it's frozen. You can't get large cargo ships in there to bring in vast supplies to carry them through to the next year. You have to fly everything in, which, as much as I love airplanes, there ain't no airplane in the world can handle the same kind of cargo one container ship can. They just can't. So you have to take multiple trips, making it far more expensive. What do you think a head of lettuce costs $20 up there? Because it costs you that much just to get it there. So they're telling us that this is a disaster, that having an open water port for a month would be a terrible thing. No, if they actually thought about this for a minute, they'd say, well, that's good news. Now the people in the Arctic can get food, fuel, and supplies at a fraction of the cost of what it costs to airlift them in, because the ports are open. But do they think of that? No, oh my God, all the ice is going to melt. I'd say, fantastic, let it melt.
What I don't understand, again, we're making fun of the 49th parallel.
Yes.
And we're saying, okay, if Canada is warming up twice the rate or twice the speed as the rest of the world is, does that mean that once we hit the 49th parallel, okay, then all of a sudden the rate of warming it decreases by 50%? But a far better question is, what about the border between Canada and Greenland?
Or Alaska.
Well, what's happening in Alaska, I don't know. But I do know for sure that in Greenland, the ice sheet in Greenland has been expanding by several hundred feet per year. We know that because the global warming activists have told us that. And they've explained that that's because of global warming.
Yes.
That the glaciers are increasing in size in Greenland and have been for a couple of years. And they're scratching their heads and they're going, well, we can't figure that out. So it must be due to global warming.
Well, I saw a comment on the article from Live Science, and somebody said, you people who are deniers and skeptics don't understand that it's getting thicker by 200 feet a year. It's not getting bigger. Now, think about what that means. That means someone, let's take me, if I were to get thicker, by, say, 6 inches across my midriff, I would be bigger. And yet that logic doesn't seem to apply.
Well, it's interesting, and I'm glad somebody introduced that topic because I intend to go home tonight and explain to my wife.
You're not getting bigger. You're just thicker.
I'm just thicker, not bigger.
They never... Excuse me.
Nick's got the same cough I had last week.
Oh,
it was terrible. I had this thing about, I was blaming the doctor. I was saying that I started on this new medication, and one of the side effects of this medication is you get a bit of a stuffy nose and runny nose, etc.
Right.
But it turns out that I had bronchitis.
Oh, well, that'll do it.
That'll do it as well. But there's a bit of an epidemic going around with the bronchitis now. A lot of people have got it, and so I've been reading about this, that there's in the national capital area, there is a bit of an epidemic.
So should we go out and get one of those plague noses and stuff potpourri in the long beak so that we don't infect each other?
No. You could get, a face mask if you want.
No,
you still see a lot of people wearing face masks.
Have you never
right?
seen? Do you know what I mean by a plague era face?
Yes, I do know what you mean.
Yeah, they thought that it was airborne, but this stuff would filter it out, and plague doctors would not get sick and die, but they died at the same rate everybody else did, so it didn't work. Anyway, so the whole point about this is that when you read the stuff, these people convince themselves about how smart they are. And then they make statements like that. Like, how can something get thicker, but it's not bigger? Because bigger doesn't necessarily attribute itself to any one dimension. It just means there's more mass. Right? Like, if you had a box, let's say 1 foot by 1 foot.
It doesn't necessarily mean there's no mass. There's more mass.
Well, if it's getting thicker,
if the volume increases, because the mass may not increase with the volume increase. But I get the point that you're making. I mean, look, it doesn't matter whether it's getting wider or thicker. Okay, it's the
longer,
same thing.
Shorter.
Okay, the problem is not that the snow is drifting. It's that it's staying in one spot. And it's just I don't know how to answer that kind of a thing.
It's like taking a square of plasticine and then squeezing it so that it gets thicker. But you make it shorter, but it's thicker. It's still the same amount of plasticine. And if you add top of it...
Either way, it's only happening because the temperature is cooler.
We're all going to fry. Greenland must be going the other way then, obviously. Right next door to us, the temperature's dropping like a rock.
Yeah. So I'm not sure how they're controlling that. Of course, our friend Joel, right, is playing devil's advocate, talking about what could happen 700 years from now. And I'm not going to argue the point with you, Joel, okay, because according to the latest comments from our friends down south of the border, what's her name from New York, the new congresswoman there?
Oh, they call her OAC.
Everybody's doing
Olivia
the initials now, right? OAC.
Cortez.
I can't remember. Anyway, we're all going to be dead in 12 years anyway, so who cares what happens in 700 years?
That's the other thing.
And that's the thing is, who cares what happens in 50 years?
If we're all going to be dead in 12.
I say, bring the heat on, okay?
And let us enjoy a few warm winters.
Yeah, come on. So do a little bit of sunbathing. Can we do some sunbathing?
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean,
I'm not a sunbathing kind of guy.
Well, I tell you what, if I'm going to be dying in 5 years from the excess heat, I'm hitting the beach.
All I'll do is find a little place further north to go fishing in, that's all.
A little further north to go fishing?
Yep.
I'm looking for a place to roast some hot dogs.
Well, if you...
And listen, if you want to talk about heat, Nick, I'm sure you've been around some of the places too, but I've been in places where you really literally, you hear about this stuff anecdotally, but I've been in places where you literally can fry an egg on the hood of your car.
We used to cook in the boiler room.
But I mean, just from the sun.
Yeah,
right?
I get it. But I've been in places that hot. Yeah.
Yeah, you probably did steaks down there.
We did. Oh boy, let's put it. The short version is we stole a case of steaks, a bag of potatoes. What else did we take? A couple of watermelons, and there was something else, and I can't remember what it was. We were storing ship somewhere, and we had people positioned in key places, and we dropped the mushrooms. I knew there was something else, mushrooms, and dropped them down into the boiler room and used the steam-powered equipment to cook it on. And about 2 o'clock in the morning, we were having our meal, and I'll never forget it. Larry Brody was a sailor friend of mine. He was a leading seaman at the time, and he was handing out the meal, and there were 5 guys in the boiler room, and he had his back turned so we could see what was coming up behind him. He couldn't. And a guy stepped around the back of the console, had 2.5 bars on his shoulder. It was the executive officer on informal rounds during the middle watch, which is from midnight until 4. And just as Larry took his plate, the XO leaned over, and into his ear he yelled, "I hope that one's for me." And Larry said, "I was thinking of you when I made it, sir." And when he was done, the XO turned to him and said, "That was the best meal I never had." Turned and walked up the ladder. So Larry had to wait another 45 minutes to get his.
Okay, we have a call from Robert, who wants to talk a little bit about global warming. Hey, Robert, how are you, my friend?
Oh, I'm great like usual. Like I said, I want to bring a little history to the audience about global warming. I did some research on this, lots of research, and 10,000 years ago, we had a little incident that finished called the last ice age. And in that period of time, there was between 1 million and 5 million human beings on the planet. And the only thing they were causing for pollution were cooking fires and fires to keep their cave warm. And they were mostly hunters and gatherers. So if mankind is responsible for global warming climate change, what caused 4 miles or 6 kilometer thick glaciers to melt?
Well, that's a very good question. It's one you never get a straight answer to. Because
yeah, well, like I said, only 1 to 5 million people, and smoke from fire created the glaciers to melt.
No, of course.
Well, but this is the rhetorical trick that these guys like to use. And Joel, I know you're listening. We're not referring to you. You're one of the good guys, okay? We like you, Joel. But a lot of guys out there, what they do is, you try to have a rational conversation, Robert, about global warming and about climate change. And the minute we talk about how carbon dioxide and human activity is not demonstrated to be the cause of climate change or even just global warming, okay, you're automatically accused of being climate change deniers. And I guess the argument that I would make is very similar to what you've just pointed out, that the climate changes, it changes cyclically, and we don't really understand why it does, but there are going to be cooling periods and there are going to be warming periods, just as you've pointed out, and they're not caused by human activity. What causes them? There are a few other very good theories out there.
Joe, it's called the sun. The sun is responsible. And the Earth's orbit and the Earth's axis, it shifts. The Earth goes into an elliptical orbit around the sun. All this is a cause of climate change.
Well, it's a good. I'm not questioning that, Robert. I think it's an excellent theory. It could very well be 100% correct. We haven't proven it. We don't have the tools to be able to measure these things and over a period of time and prove them. But the point here that I'm making is that just because one says that they don't accept the theory of human-caused or man-made climate change does not mean that we are climate change deniers. I still like to talk about how when I was in grade school and they'd bus us into the city to go to the Museum of Natural History, and I thought that one of the most fascinating things that I heard at that time when I was a kid was that here I was standing here in the city of Ottawa, and that at some point in time in the past, it had been a tropical jungle, okay, possibly with dinosaurs and all this stuff, okay? And I thought, wow, how is that possible? But how is it possible? It's possible through climate change. Might also be possible through continental drift. But, the fact of the matter is that the climate changes. We don't fully understand why it does, the most plausible explanation is the one that you've just given about, the changes in the Earth's orbit and variances and the changes with respect to the sun's emissions. To me, that's the most plausible explanation. But the evidence it's not only do I disagree about man-made climate change, but I'm saying, straight out, the evidence that's out there simply doesn't support it. It simply doesn't support it.
And one last point for Joel. Okay, so according to that new report in Canada, it went up 2.3 degrees. Okay, so in the North Pole, instead of being minus 40, it's minus 38 degrees. So what? It's still cold.
Yeah, and the point I was making earlier, somewhat tongue-in-cheek, about having open water a whole month of the year, that's a little sarcasm. But even let's say that they're right. Would it be a bad thing? Why is making Canada warmer a bad thing? It's not that, like, Joel makes a good point. In the chat room, he says it's climate is changing. Adaptation is what's important. I couldn't agree with him more. Let's stop wasting money.
Yeah, but it would also increase our growing season.
Well, so let's stop wasting money trying to stop a process we have no control over and learn to live with it and reap the benefits that come with it,
exactly.
Like extended growing seasons, crop yields, these kinds of things, and having more arable land, having the people who live in the north not have to suffer through, the length of days probably wouldn't change, but if you could put up a greenhouse up there because it's warm enough now, or you could insulate one so that it wouldn't cost as much to run one, guess what? That helps alleviate the cost of living in the high Arctic.
Now, Robert,
also 97%.
Go ahead.
Well, just as 97% of the greenhouse gases is water vapors.
That's right.
So what are we going to do? We're going to get rid of the clouds, get rid of the rain, get rid of everything.
You have to get rid of the ocean.
It's CO2 only 4%. And in greenhouses these days, they have what they call CO2 injectors. They bring up the CO2 count to 850 parts per million instead of the 400 parts that there is in the atmosphere. And they get greener, bigger vegetables, fruits, whatever you want to
Now, Robert, I have a question for you. Annual Earth Day and Earth Hour are coming up.
No, they're past.
What?
Last weekend, March 30th.
Oh, okay. I take that back. Egg on my face. I was going to... So for next year, Robert, for Earth Day next year, Robert, what are you going to do to mark Earth Day next year?
I turn everything on. You want to know why? Because it takes more power when you shut everything down and you bring everything back up at the same time than just leaving everything on. And I'm an electrician. I know what I'm talking about. The surge in power is ridiculous when everybody turns everything back on at the same time.
Well, I know what I want to do. I want to go out and burn a couple old tractor tires just for the sake of it, styrofoam. I'm just being... I don't do that, but I don't,
No, I want to start a campaign for turning all the lights on.
Yeah.
I want all the lights on Earth for Earth Hour.
That I do.
Okay. Leave your lights on. See, now, just goes to show you, here I am. I had no idea that it passed. I thought it was coming up.
Yeah, March 30th. Because I remember that when I was still on terrestrial radio during that hour, I would run around the studio and turn everything on, including the big spotlights for TV.
Yeah, but there's two periods, Nick. There's two things. There's Earth Hour and there's Earth Day. So there's two events.
Are they not at this? They're not on the same day.
Okay.
I don't think so. I think they're two separate events. Earth Hour is when you shut everything off, and Earth Day something else.
Okay, so we've got Nick hot on this right now.
Monday, April 22nd.
Okay, we haven't missed it.
We were both right.
Okay, we haven't missed it, guys. All right, so we're going to start a campaign starting tonight. Okay, for everybody out there, for Earth Hour, turn your lights on. And I'll tell you why. Because there has been no invention that has been better for the environment, better for public safety.
Than the light bulb.
Okay, than the electric light bulb.
That's right. And the incandescent light bulb, actually, because the one that we have now, thanks for your call, Robert. We're going to let you go. Appreciate it. But
okay, thanks.
Have a
See you
great
later.
Day. Yep, you bet. but the CFL light bulb is an environmental disaster. It has 70 electronic components. It's got mercuric oxide. Yeah, I went to the when these things first came out, I did some research on them, and in the state of Maine, they're treated as a biohazard. And if you drop one, you have to have a hazmat suit put on. You can't vacuum them up. You have to open a window and ventilate for like 24 hours before you can even go into the room just to clean these things up if you drop one. Now, how many of them get pitched in the garbage and end up in the dump where the mercury in them seeps into the groundwater? And now you've got all kinds of problems with leachate control. You've got all kinds of problems with mercuric poisoning, or mercury poisoning of the groundwater. There are far worse, and they have a tendency. I think they're probably better now, but when they first came out, they would burst into flames when they burned out. So this is their answer? Really? So anyway, it's just, you know what? I would have a lot more respect for the green movement if the answers they came up with actually made sense. Like, go ahead.
Well, I just want to make a really important point on the light bulbs, okay? And that is that people automatically think that the carbon footprint, I hate that term, but I'm going to use it because people...
It's in the common vernacular.
Vernacular, correct. So the carbon footprint for the electric light bulb in most cases is what? For hydroelectricity is zero. It's zero because there is no combustion in the process of making that electricity. And interestingly enough, you might be against nuclear-powered electrical generation plants, but the carbon footprint for those is zero as well. So, ironically, and this is how we get our power in Ontario, is through nuclear or hydro. I'm not sure that there's any coal or oil-fired generation plants.
No, Kathleen Wynne had a big celebration for shutting down the last coal-fired power plant in Ontario.
So by if you turn off your lights and you light a candle as a substitute, okay, you are actually increasing.
You're defeating the whole purpose.
There's zero emissions by having your lights on. So why would you want to turn your lights off and light a candle? It just doesn't make sense. And this is the stupidity of people on this stuff is.
And we're not against lighting candles.
That was harsh.
No, it's not.
It's the stupidity of the people who are promoting it, and unfortunately, the common person out there they're so gullible. They're so inconversant on fundamental, basic mathematical things and scientific issues, etc., that they just believe everything that they hear. And of course, as human beings, I think that there's something psychological. I think there's something about these things that when somebody is presenting the most disastrous situation, we tend to believe that as opposed to other things. I guess I don't know.
All
anyway,
right.
What are you going to do, right?
Yeah. We are going to take a break. It's the bottom of the hour. When we come back, we have a guest calling in who's going to be talking about an event he's part of. His name is Ron Barr. He's the owner and operator of Rush Creek Wines, who is a sponsor of our radio show. And he's going to be talking about, I'll let him fill you in on the details. It's a great cause, and we're happy to have him on. Is he there yet?
I don't know, but we're going to take a break anyway.
Yep.
And,
well, when he calls in, we'll put him on right away.
Okay. So we'll be back in a few minutes.
You bet. Okay, welcome back to the Combat Zone, folks, where we sit and discuss all things that matter to you every day. He's Joseph, I'm Nick, and on the line with us we have Ron Barr, owner, proprietor, and head vintner of Rush Creek Wines. Welcome to the show, Ron.
How are you guys doing? You guys sound fabulous this evening.
Oh, we're having a ball. We're just poking fun at the greenies and, the traditionals.
Joseph, you're not too hard. Joseph, you're not too hard. You're realistic.
Well,
you're
that's
realistic. Anyway.
Nice of you to say, Ron.
Go ahead. You know what? I enjoy listening to you guys. I can't. You guys are like Oscar and Felix. Trust me. You guys are totally opposite, but I love you guys to death, and I love the perspective. Opposite in a number of ways. But how are you gentlemen doing this evening? Pretty
good. But now that you have opened the door, I have to ask you, who is Oscar and who is Felix?
You don't know who the odd couple were?
No, I know that. I want to know which of us is Oscar.
I wish to remain silent after that. I love you. I think you're both brilliant. And just anyway, Nick, you were talking about my winery, weren't you?
Yes, I was.
But you know what I'm doing at this moment? I am preparing for a big case tomorrow morning. I go to court tomorrow in Laurinell on a building code violation. Somebody had ignored a stop work order, and it was for such a frivolous thing. And I'm just reading for some previous case files, and it says that a construction municipality should only worry about regulations that pertain to health and safety, and not cosmetics. The guy's putting up an outside skirt of a wall for water protection, and they're freaking. And he didn't even go down to the bottom he just went to the frost line at 4.6 versus 8 feet, and there he got summons to go to court tomorrow. So I'm going to challenge the young lady that put the work stop order as her knowledge on the subject of her ability to consider a wall safe or not. So. Just annoys me dealing. I go to court 73 times last year, guys, 73 times, and in May I'm taking a paralegal course because I enjoy the forum. And as everybody knows, I run the Greater Ottawa Truckers Association, so I got a little bit of a built-in audience with those guys with the Highway Traffic Act. So I decided to bite the bullet. And you know what they say, Nick, what are you going to do when you grow up? I think I found my calling.
Found your calling.
In May, I'll start commencing my next career.
Oh, man. You don't have enough already?
Anyway. Yes, no doubt. I'm crazy. I drove home for this court case. 7 hours is my winery. I live in Ottawa, and I drive to Elmer, Ontario.
Right.
And you were mentioning we got a great promotion. I got approached by the MS Society about fundraising at the winery. So I always like engaging with different and unique things. Mm-hmm. So instead of they proposed a $1 or $2 per bottle, and it's very tough when you're dealing with the alcohol gaming and the control and the count of all the liquor sold. We literally record it by the liter. So what I propose to do is that we would this Saturday I have 8 folks who have MS coming out to the winery. They're going to help me cut up some strawberries. We're going to cut up 400 pounds. We're going to make a 50-gallon batch of wine. They're going to help me make it on the Saturday, put it all together, and having little teams cutting fruit, getting the ingredients, getting the sugar water done, doing the stirring and everything. And then what we're going to do, Nick and Joe, is we're going to get a head and shoulder shot of each one of the 8 that are participating.
Right.
We're going to make a poster. And we're going to sell out of the 50 gallons, we should get 250 bottles, and then we're going to sell most of the proceeds, with the exception of a hard cost, will go to the MS Society. So, I believe people will buy it just for the sake of supporting the 8 that were the winemakers in this instance. So it's something we can do. I always even on my website I said I never say no to somebody asking a donation. I'm a very generous guy, and with my time or with however I can help. And this is just one way we can give back to the community, which I like doing so much.
Well, certainly is a worthy cause, that's for sure. And knowing you,
yeah.
the one thing, because you and I have known each other for quite a number of years now, you don't do anything by half measure.
That's correct.
And when
and I have my heart into it, and I enjoy it, and I really enjoy really giving back. That's one thing. I very, very, very overly generous with my time, and it's always been something I've enjoyed doing.
Well, that's when people like you certainly help make the community work function, and I do know that when you went into the vintner business, you took me by surprise. It was not something, because Ron Barr was all about horse racing and trucks and that kind of thing. And then out of the blue came this whole vintners thing. And I thought, okay, well, I know how this is going to go because, like I said, you don't do things by half measure. So congratulations on the success of the wine. I know you're very early on. You won several prestigious awards for your wine.
In the 4 years I've been making wine, never having made an ounce prior to commencing in the business 4 years ago, I've won 7 international medals. But, Nick, I've always been somebody that does unique things because I've done 10,800 horse races, and I had to call one before I could get to 10,000. And same with Pez dispensers. I've sold over 200,000
Pez
of them.
dispensers?
And you had to sell one before you can go to 200,000. I made Pez the hottest collectible in the 90s without exception. I beat Walmart, the Zellers. They didn't even know what Pez was when I got into it as deep as I did.
Now, are those those little those are those little candy
those little
dispensers?
Candy dispensers, like Goofy on the top, and you pull his head back, and out would pop a little treat.
I remember I bought one. I went into a Zellers, and it was the birth of my collection. And Nick and Joe, I have over $50,000 worth of collectible toys in my winery right now to this day.
Oh man!
And I walked into a Zellers, and I saw Peter Pez rack. It was something new, 6-foot Peter Pez rack. I bought one of every kind, 35 different kinds. The birth of my collection. Then I found a magazine because I wanted to know more about Pez, and it was a little article. A little wee advertising. It wasn't an inch by an inch. It wasn't that big, and it was Marianne Kennedy, Minnesota, biggest Pez collector in the U.S., and I'm getting in before Pez was even known. So she tells me all about Pez, 35 different kinds I can get in Canada that come in from Europe that they can't get into the States. She asked me to send her one of each, 35 different kinds. I went to Zellers, bought them for $1.50, sold them for $2 each, $3 at the time. And then she told me about a newsletter, a Pez collector's newsletter. I called the guy up. I said, "How much is a full page?" He said, $20. I said, "Book it for the rest of your natural life." He sent me the back order. He sent me the very first one, and there was 220 collectors in this book. Name, address, phone number. I put a flyer together. All 35 that I could get. I went and bought 10 cases, gentlemen. I thought I'd get stuck with 8. The next order was 100 cases, and then 100 cases. I sent a flyer to all 220 that were listed as Pez collectors in the U.S. all over from coast to coast. Burlingame Pez Museum has bought tremendous amounts of Pez from me. And then I went and bought the 10 cases. I thought I'd get stuck with 8. My next order was 100. Then I was buying hundreds at a time until the U.S. And then a company went bankrupt. I had 22... count them, 22 6-foot Peter Pez racks in my basement. I was picking them up from a company gone bankrupt for 50 Canadian, selling them. Couldn't keep them for 300 U.S.
Oh, man.
Then USA sends Canadian, the distributor, a letter saying that they wanted me cut off, mentioned my name. I was selling too much into the States. So my guy in Canada called me up, and he says, "I'm going to have to quit selling to you." But I knew him, and he was just joking. And I said, fine. I sent a guy to Europe with 40,000. I brought 1,600 cases home, and I put them in a warehouse. I took this guy to the warehouse. I said, "You won't sell too many Pez. You're selling them for $55 a case." I got $12 in each from Europe, right from the Pez company. When he said I couldn't get them he said, "They'll never sell them to you." I said, "Buddy, I walk in there with a big load of cash. They don't care if I take them to the road and have them crushed." I could take them back to Canada, and I did. I sold over 200,000. There's articles of me. I'm in collectors' books. Thanking me.
Is this something you're still doing today?
Magazine articles on me on Pez. It's craziness. Pardon me?
Are you still doing it today?
No, but I'm into. You know what? I've got 3,500. I've been to John Council's house when you had I remember going to John Council, and he had a wall full of Hot Wheels.
Yes, he does.
I have 3,500 carded Hot Wheels. Oh. I have the original Lesney Matchbox set from the 50s and 60s. Those steel wheels, mint in box. I have somewhere 700 U.S. I have the biggest currently Soaky bottle collection in Canada, bubble bath dispensers.
Soaky
Nick,
bugs.
I was, as a kid in Sudbury, I had the first ever sports collectible shop. And then I had the first ever sports collectible show, Nick, and they thought we would get 40 people. I got 4,000 people. Double page spread in the local newspaper, Sudbury Star up there.
Oh, my
they were
God.
blown away. 4,000 attended a card show, and I was the organizer. Pictures of me all over. Ron Barr expected a reasonable turnout. In the end, it turned out to be 8 hours of wheeling and dealing and blockbuster dealing. Over 4,000 took part.
Oh,
I
my
love
God.
doing that stuff.
Obviously.
Crazy. I'm crazy.
Yeah, I've heard that about you.
Anyway.
Ron,
I'm not.
I have a question for you.
Certainly.
This is a sandbag question, but I'm sure you have an opinion. As what one might call a serial entrepreneur, what are some of the factors? Give me the 3 factors that impede business today. Younger people just sort of getting into business and making money the way
I've got that answer, Joe. I've got that answer. Number one, the biggest issue with new entrepreneurs is that they usually have an entrepreneurial seizure, and that's they used to be doing something, and all of a sudden they want to become a business owner. But what they profoundly fail to do, the number one tenet of running a business, Joe, is producing profitable sales. Producing profitable sales. Number 2, you must become brilliant. Absolutely brilliant at controlling cash flow. Most people get killed by that. They don't have an understanding of when they're going to get paid. They let it drag on. They've got all these expenses up front, like payroll. They try to be good people. They get into a hole. Then something happens on the other end, and I tell each and every person I run into, when you're dealing and negotiating, you throw money on the table in the first instant. Do not let that be the problem at the end. When I meet a lawyer or an accountant, I ask them, what is your hourly rate? They squirm in their seats like crazy because that makes them uncomfortable. But if they're $400, now I understand if I hire you for $5, it's going to be $2,000 instead of me thinking it was $200. Then we have a problem. So producing profitable sales, becoming brilliant at controlling your cash flow, and structuring your business for ease of operation. How many people work on the business of the business? They're too busy, picking the low-flying fruit, and once that's gone, they're stuck. They don't know where to generate their next revenue. They're lost. So it's incumbent upon them. Budget. I walked into over 400 businesses, top to bottom, left to right. Always 95% do not have budgets. But when I ask them, when you go home with your $1,000 a week, you have a budget to pay your rent, your hydro, your car, and all this crap, and yet you've got $1 million business here, and you don't even know how much your payroll is costing you? You don't know. So what I make them do, if I help them, is they must produce a budget. And it's got to produce budget. And when I do a budget, it's not sales minus expenses equals whatever's left over. Baloney. I'm going to force profit. I get everybody that I work with to understand when they walk their bums through the door every day, we're looking to see who steals some of our profit. So I make sales minus a profit that company needs to make equals the cost you and I, Mr. Owner, have to be brilliant at controlling. So if we're engineering this business and we can predetermine it looking at historical financial information, so hypothetically, if the profit's 7 cents out of every dollar, then we've got to be brilliant at controlling 93 cents, not 97, not $1.02, because I've gone into lawyers' offices, $7 million. Every dollar they bring in, there's $1.02 going out, and I said, holy mackerel, Mr. Lawyer. I went in and I said, if I was an investor here, I would take my money out or I'd fire you. For every dollar you bring in, you spend $1.02 because you have no clue what you're doing here. You're a great lawyer. You suck at the business of the business. So, Joe, profit, cash flow, and how am I ever going to take the pulse of this business and make it better? Make
All right,
sense?
well, that's you know what? This is a conversation we could.
I could have a whole program on that. That's a great. You know what? For anybody, an entrepreneur, I'm going to tell you, it's not hard, but you've got to do it by design versus default. A lot lot of people, they get into business and they assume things happen and they become overwhelmed. I open every single door, fear nothing, because every time I walk into a business and there's some confusion, it's because we're not understanding something, Mr. Owner, and we're going to break that open because it's your responsibility to understand and give it a rule, a procedure, and not let it fester on its own. Anyway, gentlemen, I could go on and on, but I'll let you get back to your combat zone.
Before you do that, the website
I could go on a rant. Trust me, Jets. I could talk your ears off all night for your 2 hours.
Okay, well, let me get from you your website address for the listener.
My website, I have, it's rushcreekwines.com, rushcreekwines.com. And if anybody watched that 401 rescue, I think a week ago, Nick and Joe, with regard to them taking that tow truck or that dump truck off that bridge in Port Bruce.
Right.
That is a kilometer from my winery as the crow flies. That's just over the hill.
All right. Now, you have the ability for people, if they want to sample your wine, they can buy it out over the net?
Yes. Yes, they can, or send me an email, ronbar@rogers.com, ronbar, all one word, @rogers.com. I'll deliver wine to Ottawa. I deliver it all over the province. I've delivered it, cases to Ottawa many times, so if anybody wants to sample my wine, give me an email. I'll give you a good deal on the first bottle. If you like it, you can buy some more, not a problem.
All right.
And that's bar
all
with
right,
two,
gentlemen?
Bar with 2 R's, right?
That's correct. So RONBARR @rogers.com.
All right, Ron. Thank you very much for letting us
looking forward to being a sponsor. You're the best, guys. I like you guys.
We're glad to have you on board.
I love your forum. Take care,
right.
Jets. Good night.
Okay, thanks. Take care, Ron.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
You know what I like about him? He's so quiet and so humble and so introverted that you really got to work on him to pry out the information. I'm teasing him a little bit, of course. I have known Ron for a number of years, and the nice thing about him is he actually will tell you what's on his mind. And whether you like it or not, at least you know you're getting his honest opinion. That's one of the great, I think it's a hallmark of somebody who's got a lot of self-confidence and that is good at what he does. So it's a pleasure to have him as a sponsor. It's a pleasure to give him the forum to promote his event. And I look forward to having him do more things in the future.
But you know what I find most interesting when I hit him with that question, he had three items to illustrate,
right,
to talk about. But what I found interesting was, and by the way, that was completely unrehearsed. We hadn't given him a heads up about the question. It was completely out of the blue. He had no idea it was coming. So what does he talk about? He doesn't talk about government, regulation, etc. All which are, I mean, you and I know Ron, you know him better than I do, but it's not like he has a love for government.
Not at all.
And it's not like he has blinders on when it comes to overregulation and the impediment that government can be to economic growth. But it still all comes down to the individual entrepreneur.
Absolutely. His attitude is, I don't care what the obstacles are. I will either go over them, under them, around them, or through them, and find a way to make it happen. And not everybody is going to like that kind of rough personality. I do. I have a tremendous respect for it, because I would prefer somebody a little rough around the edges who's honest in the way that they come across, and what you see is what you get. I like that. But at the same time, he's also not afraid to put his shoulder to the wheel and do the work. And it's that kind of mentality that we lack in a lot of cases, where people, they stick their toe in the water and say, well, I'll try this and see if it works. If you don't go in whole hog, you might as well not even get wet, because it takes that kind of commitment to achieve any kind of success. It's like playing football or playing hockey. If you're going to go running down the football field as a wide receiver, being chased by a linebacker who, philosophically wants to rip your head off and prevent you from catching that ball, if you're not going flat out, you're never going to catch it. He'll catch you before you get to the ball. Or if you do catch it, he'll hit you so hard you'll knock it right out of your hands. So the problem is you've got to be totally committed to what you're doing. And that's what I really hear in his voice and other entrepreneurs that I know that are very much like that. Now, they're not all as, I don't want to use the word gruff. That's not the right word. They're not all straightforward and straight to the point as he is. Some are more delicate, if I can put it that way. But it's that internal burn to succeed that's there that I think needs to be encouraged in people.
RushCreekWines.com.
Yes. And
So-
he does make amazing wine.
And they're all fruit wines. They're not.
Yeah.
They're not. They're not grape. They're not what people might think is traditional wines.
Nope, he's
They're,
got
strawberry,
apple wine,
peach,
strawberry wine.
apple.
He has a wine called, and I can't remember the name of it, but it's like he said when you drink this, it's like drinking a slice of apple pie. And I tried some, and that's exactly what it's like. Imagine having an apple pie in front of you in liquid form. And that's, if you really like that, then you're really going to love that wine. It's kind of like Ron's personality. You either are going to like it or you're not. Now, I kind of liked it. I thought it was pretty good. And the other wines I've tried by him are all, I think one of the reasons why he did so well with the awards, and we should have pressed him a little bit to get the name of the awards, but to get 7 international awards in his first several years of operation for a brand new vintner is amazing. So I think part of it is because his wines are so unique. Sounds like an ongoing infomercial, doesn't it? But I just, when you find a company or a businessman that's doing well, why not promote them?
I agree.
Yes, because we don't have enough entrepreneurship in this province and in this country. And if more people ran their own businesses, they wouldn't be so easily taken in by the need for government regulation.
So we're going to be coming up to a break. We have a couple of more minutes. But let me just ask you this, okay? The government of Ontario changing the motto of the province on license plates.
I love it.
Good idea or bad idea? You didn't even give me a chance to ask you the question.
Because I knew the answer. I'm committing a sin here. I'm not letting you finish your question before I give you the answer.
That's no way to do radio.
I know. That's what I mean. I'm committing a sin here. So, because what you're talking about is the idea of taking the slogan for the province from Ontario, yours to discover, and changing it on the license plates to open for business. And given the climate at the moment, and provinces do on occasion change up their slogan, many times for political reasons. La Belle Province is a classic one. Now it's La Mise Vient, which means, I think, and I'm butchering that, but I think it means we remember. Now, I've often asked myself, what is it you remember? What does that mean?
Je me souviens.
That's it. I see. That's what I mean. I knew I'd butcher it. But the point is that they've changed that slogan. And it's not uncommon. It's not something that happens every day because of the cost involved, but because now you have to change the dies when you're printing out these new license plates. But at the same time, I think it reflects a positive attitude about Ontario that Mr. Ford is bringing to the province from the point of view of economics and telling the rest of the world, especially our traders, our business partners to the south, our biggest customers, that, you know what? The past is the past. We're open for business. We want to win back some of the business that's been lost. So I think it's a great idea.
Okay. Well, coming up to the top of the hour, we're going to take a break. And when we come back, I guess we just don't have a choice. We have to get back into the SNC-Lavelin debate, discussion, controversy. It just won't go away, Nick. Every day, almost every week, there's new revelations. There are new items to talk about. So stay tuned, friends. We'll be back in about 3 or 4 minutes. Stretch your legs, and see you on the other side of the break. Okay, I'm Joe. He's Nick, and you are re-entering the combat zone. This is our number 2, and that was a great segment. Last one, Ron Barr talking a little bit about his experience in business, etc. But now we have to come back down to the real world. Or the fake world, I guess. One might depends on one's perspective, really, when you think about it.
Yep.
Nick, man, SNC-Lavelin, and the ongoing Peyton Place soap opera saga that is gripping the federal Liberal Party government and caucus. Every week I think, okay, I don't want to talk about this, but every week they give us something more to talk about.
Well,
and of course, today or yesterday or whenever it was, Judy Wilson-Raybould and Jane Philpott both kicked out of the federal Liberal caucus now. And last Friday, the announcement that Judy Wilson-Raybould had surreptitiously recorded phone conversations between herself and the clerk of the Privy Council, and she made those, handed those recordings over, that recording over to the Justice Committee,
right?
Which then went on to make the recording public. So, and it's riveting. It's fascinating listening. But gosh, is this going to end at some point in time?
No, I don't think so. Too many people want to know. Too many people in the country now want to get to the bottom of this, and they won't be satisfied until we actually get all the gory details. And I know there's different schools of thought on this, but the public, once they latch onto something, a classic example would be the Me Too movement in the States. There's different times when public attention gets so focused that it paralyzes the government, that you can't do anything if you're not willing to deal with this. And this is the monster that our glorious leader, Justin Trudeau, is now facing. He's only making it worse by booting both these ladies out without caucus voting on it, by the way. I know that it's supposed to be a vote within caucus, and they probably would have voted to boot them out anyway, but Justin Trudeau had them booted before. He just made the command decision, boom, you guys are gone, even as the caucus members were still filing into the room. They hadn't even had a chance to vote on it, to discuss it amongst themselves, and the Prime Minister brought the gavel down and gave them the old iron boot out the door. So he's acting like a dictator. And there's a certain amount of that comes with being the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister has a lot more power than most people think. You compare him to the U.S. President, okay, the U.S. President has a lot more checks and balances on his power than the Prime Minister of Canada does. But all that being equal, Canadians really, really have become focused like a laser on this, and this will haunt them for a very long time, especially now that there's a probe launched into SNC about some of the money from the Economic Development Corporation going to SNC to win contracts overseas, where some of that money may have been used to bribe officials to illegally win contracts. So this is a whole nother element of this. And when you look at the government as a whole and the way that they do business, everything from the Norman trial to whether there's anything wrong there or not, people in government are supposed to not only avoid a scandal, but the appearance of one. And they've broken that rule so many times, it's not even funny. But the bottom line is Canadians are now waking up to the fact that they're being led by someone whose only concern. And this is true of most politicians, but never have I seen it to this degree, where they will do anything. They will sacrifice anything for power. Absolutely anything. They have no moral standards, no ethics, none of that stuff.
But I'm really not comfortable in the role that I've sort of taken on in this debate between you and I, Nick, because I've been quite defensive of the Prime Minister. First of all, I mean, I feel a little bit like a mosquito at a nudist colony.
You don't know where to begin.
I just don't know where to begin.
Right.
Okay. I hear what you're saying, and I'm not going to question whether or not the Liberals or Justin Trudeau are going to do everything that's unethical and immoral to hold on to power. Let's set that aside for a second. Maybe it's true, but I'm trying to see how this does help them stay in power. If the calculation is we want to help SNC-Lavelin, okay, what is the point? Because helping SNC-Lavelin doesn't help them stay in power. So I'm not sure that that's the case.
Well, that's what people want to know.
Okay,
that's the big question.
Well, it's. I guess it's a good question, but if I could see, you see, I think what the Prime Minister is guilty of here is really fumbling the ball when it comes to defending his desire to not see SNC-Lavelin unable to bid on federal government contracts. Because that's really what it comes down to. And I have some strong opinions about that as well. First of all, let's all agree that the underlying crime that's been committed here is that SNC-Lavelin, at least allegedly, bribed the government of Libya and used potentially, now it could very well be, that they used Canadian taxpayer dollars
to do it.
To do that. And if they've done it once, they may have done it in other places as well.
Right.
I think the first thing to remember is that occurred, if in fact that occurred, it didn't occur under the current government. It occurred under the previous Conservative government. To me, that's irrelevant, but I think it's just something to put out there, okay? So the Liberal government and Justin Trudeau can't take the blame for that, okay? But if a crime was committed, and let's say for the sake of argument that a crime was committed, doesn't it make more sense that the people who committed the crime pay the price for committing the crime? In other words, I'm against the whole notion, as the law that was brought into the previous government made it, that you charge the corporation is the criminal. The corporation stands trial, and whether or not the directors of the corporation have personal liability in his... Pardon me, folks. Just a little bit of residual bronchitis there. Whether or not the individual directors of the corporation bear any kind of criminal liability here, okay, and have to pay a fine, perhaps they should have to. Because somebody had to sign off on this at some point in time, and this is what directors of corporations are supposed to be monitoring and ensuring doesn't happen. Okay, so let's assume all of that happened. Is it fair to say that we're going to bar the company from doing business with the federal government in Canada for 10 years if they're convicted? And as a consequence of that, even though I agree that there weren't 9,000 jobs on the line, but certainly there are some jobs on the line. And my question is, why should the secretary and the people answering the phone and the paper shufflers and the administrators who are employed at SNC-Lavelin, not 9,000 people, but maybe 900 people, why should they have to be penalized for the malfeasance of a handful of people within the corporation? So I'm all for a criminal prosecution here. I just don't understand why you can't just prosecute the criminals or the alleged criminals, but the corporation itself continues to do business, perhaps under new leadership, okay? Instead of punishing the people within the corporation who stand to lose their jobs if the corporation closes or moves. So there's a defense there, and in my view, the biggest mistake that the Liberal government has made in this case is by hiding somehow, saying or playing around with that potential defense. I think it's a legitimate defense, and if they had just said, "Look, you're right, we're pushing for this, and this is why we're pushing for it," I think people would have understood. They may not have agreed, but I think they would have understood. So that's one point, okay? You can feel like jumping in and challenging me, but I have a couple of other points I want to make on this. Okay?
I'll let you finish your points.
Okay. Here's the other thing, okay? I have heard ad nauseum for the last number of weeks words like, or phrases like the inviolability or the ancient principle of prosecutorial and judicial independence, okay? And my answer to that is hogwash. There are many prosecutions that are by statute require the judgment and the sign-off of the Attorney General. Hate crimes, for instance. Before the police can lay a hate crime charge, the Attorney General has to examine the case and personally has to sign off on it.
Yeah.
Now, that's a political decision. That's not an independent judicial decision. Here's the other thing. People don't understand. In the Supreme Court of Canada, okay, as we know it today, the Supreme Court, quote unquote, okay, that is to say, the highest court of the land.
Yes.
That's, in terms of Canadian history, that's still only a relatively new role that it plays. The highest court of appeal in Canada, up until 1947 or 48 or 49 or thereabouts, okay, the highest court of appeal in Canada was the Judicial Committee of the House of Lords in Great Britain.
Yeah, that was the Westminster Act, was it not, that brought that back? Or
well, no,
that?
No, that was the way it always was. The Statute of Westminster was passed in 1931.
Oh, okay.
And then in criminal cases, I believe it was sometime in the 30s. I'm not going to speculate on what year or what, but it was in the 1930s that criminal cases no longer could be appealed to the Judicial Committee of the Lords, but civil case could still be appealed to them. And even though the committee was, even though the committee that heard these appeals was made up of judges and former judges, okay, even then they were still members of political parties, and so I this notion of prosecutorial independence is not as black and white. It's not as sharp as people seem to be portraying it to be. So I actually think in this case that everybody acted properly. This is my judgment. I know I'm going to get in trouble with my conservative friends. I'm almost afraid to look at the comment section as we go ahead. But I actually think that everybody acted properly until Friday. Okay? And my last point, Nick, I know I'm dominating the conversation.
No, that's okay. Go ahead.
Okay? I think that the former Attorney General was entitled to say that she didn't want to interfere in this case. I think that the Prime Minister was entitled to ask for some political consideration here. I think that it was defensible. Why he did not defend that to the hilt, I don't know, but he didn't. I think that was a mistake. I didn't see what was particularly wrong with it. I don't think it was unethical. He asked, perhaps even put pressure, and the Attorney General said no. And if that was the reason why the Attorney General was shuffled out of her position, well, the discretion of the Prime Minister to appoint and fire ministers in our system of government is absolute. And it's no good saying, well, he didn't have the right to, or there was this going on or whatever. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. He's right, the Prime Minister's right, his or her right, to hire who they want and appoint who they want as minister, and to relieve them of that responsibility is absolute, absolute, absolute. I can't. Did I say absolute? Did you understand what I mean?
I think you mentioned it once or twice, yes.
So now let me go back to the third point very quickly, and that is the other problem that is, the other item that is absolute is the absolute sanctity of cabinet secrecy. And in fact, when you become a member of the Privy Council, and you become a member of the Privy Council when you're appointed as a minister, you take an oath of secrecy. And there are reasons why you take that oath of secrecy. There are reasons why you conduct all affairs at cabinet are conducted in secret. And that is because that is the only way that you can actually remove the political pressures. Okay? Now, I know that sounds a little counterintuitive, but if every discussion is open to scrutiny and every comment is made public, then everybody's going to have an opinion and everybody's going to put political pressure and all of those consider. So the only way that you can ultimately relieve, and you can't eliminate it entirely because a lot of the decisions that are made are political decisions.
Right.
In fact, by definition, all of them are political decisions. But the only way that you can mitigate that is by having absolute solidarity, absolute confidentiality. And if something happens that you disagree with, short of an outright breaking of the law, which nobody alleges has happened here, okay, short of that, and even in that case, it's questionable, but short of that, there is never a justification for the kind of breach of cabinet secrecy that Judy Wilson-Raybould committed by recording a conversation with the clerk of the Privy Council and releasing that recording to the public. So those are the 3 points that I have to make.
All right, well, let me go back to your first point. First of all, this idea that it's the old how he handled the whole thing. It's not the scandal, it's the lie. It's the cover-up that gets you. And what this has done is demonstrated by his own actions or lack of actions or the twisting of the tail. And by that I don't mean an animal's tail. I'm talking about a story. He has come out and changed his position, and by he I'm talking about the Prime Minister, at least 4 times over the course of the last 56 or 57 days, however long this has been going on. And first nothing happened, and then something happened, but it's no big deal. And then, well, you know, I didn't actually have a conversation with her, but yes, I did. And it's just, instead of coming out and doing what you were just saying he should have done, made the defense for the position.
Or alternatively said right from the word go, we do not discuss what goes on in private
either way,
cabinet.
But he didn't do either one of those things. So what is done is raised the bar of suspicion to such a height that there's no way he can ever jump over it. Now, I'm not defending him either. There's no secret. I think he is the worst prime minister, certainly in my lifetime, if not in Canadian history. And I think there's plenty of evidence to back that up. Some of the decisions he's made, some of the appointments he's made, some of the policies he's put in place, the carbon tax, which we'll get into, if not tonight, then certainly next week. These kinds of things are all terrible decisions. And there's plenty of justification for having him removed from office at the next election. But he's only making things worse for himself and the country at large, because what happens to our prime minister is international news. There are countries out there like China who are watching what's going on and will use it against us when we have trade negotiations or when we have people that they're incarcerated, and that, they can use this against us in their own propaganda to try to strengthen their position. This is why it's so important to have someone with some competence and some understanding of what the law says and what it doesn't, and some courage and some spine to stand up in the face of public pressure and tell the truth. These are the things that are causing Canada as a nation so much damage, and it's all because he doesn't know what to do. He has no idea where to turn next, even if Gerald Butts is still his confidant, because you can't stop 2 friends from talking on the phone. And the fact he resigned is, I still say, is nothing but a facade, that he's at home in his pajamas texting the Prime Minister or talking on the phone about what to do in this scenario. I don't think even Gerald Butts knows what to do in this case. So there's a lot of things wrong here that are only making Canadians even more suspicious. And once they don't care about the minutiae of the law the way that you laid it out. That is not what's going through most Canadians' minds. They just smell something really rotten, and they want answers, and they will not be satisfied until they get them. The rules that govern the internal workings of the government be damned. And I know that's not a very democratic way to go about it, based on what you just laid out for us. But that's the mood of the country, and that's what he has to deal with. It doesn't matter. You could be. It's like take the global warming thing. It doesn't matter if you and I are right. If the massive number of people are against us, we can be right all day long. They're still going to get their way, and that's what's happening here.
Okay, I concede all of that, but surely, Nick, you have to agree that the mood of the public and the idea that they're chasing after this and they want to know the truth, and again, I get that, but the ignoring the important procedural norms with respect to cabinet secrecy, with respect to Privy Council secrecy, and the idea of cabinet solidarity, ignoring all of that, and quite frankly, ignoring the fact, I think completely, it's just factually wrong, the idea that we have this inviolable wall separating the judiciary and the Crown Prosecution Service from any kind of political consideration or input. That's just factually wrong. It's not our history. We try to have as much judicial independence as possible, but surely to goodness, the media, Nick, has to bear some responsibility for feeding the public's desire to ignore all of these things and say, well, they're not important, or worse yet, to not educate them, or to educate them wrongly, if I could use that term, about these things, so that when they're off chasing after the truth, and heaven knows that they are entitled to the truth on these things, I'm not denying that, but there are other important considerations that ought to be taken into account, and I just think that the media, the mainstream media, and especially the conservative media, and I know my friends are, they're going to be all up in arms about this. They're going to think I'm a turncoat or whatever, but surely to goodness we could be a little bit more circumspect and a little more responsible in the way we're presenting the case to our own friends.
Okay, I look, as far as the media is concerned, conservative or otherwise, I'm going to cede that point. But ultimately, the job of educating the public about how in this particular instance the internal affairs work, and some historical background and context to it so people get it, it's not just him, falls at the feet of the Prime Minister. If when all this had broken back on the 5th of February, he'd walk to a microphone and say, look, I'm well within my rights and here's why. And this is this is why I've done this. And this is, if he'd have done that, this would be an ancient memory. But because he simply expects us to take his word without any backing of any kind, he's running into potholes, stumps, and trees that he has no reason to run into other than the fact that he's arrogant and that he is aloof and that he is insensitive and he's not really a feminist the way that he claims he is, or he never would have kicked him out of the caucus in the first place.
Well, whatever a feminist is.
Yeah, well, okay. I don't like the term either, but he claims that's what he is.
Look, let me make one more point, Nick, okay, because we're getting close to break time, and that is the accusation of corruption. Words have meaning, and whatever wrongdoing has been that has occurred here on the part of the Prime Minister and some of his closest advisors, the desire to have the Attorney General step in and have this deferred prosecution agreement put in place with SNC-Lavelin is not corruption. Corruption is a very clear thing, and I think it's important that we be careful about the words that we use. It's a little bit like, the boy who cried wolf, okay? So Yeah, I'm without defending here, I have defended him, but let's take everything at face value. Let's assume, or for the sake of argument, that everything that the Prime Minister did was wrong, unethical, yes, criminal, no, corruption, no. It doesn't rise to the level of corruption, and I just think it's important also that we be careful about the words that we're using to make sure that we're being as...
When you mention the word, the phrase, the boy who cries wolf, one of the reasons why we're supposed to be able to trust the Prime Minister is so that when the time does come to cry wolf, because there is a real one, not just somebody seeking attention, we will actually take his word for it and believe him. But he's done similar things. He's destroyed his credibility with the general population to the point that it doesn't matter what he says now, they're not going to believe him. And if we were to go to war tomorrow, I want a Prime Minister who's going to tell me the truth, whether it's good or bad. Like, this is, and I don't mean to say that I want Stephen Harper back. Now, I'm not going to get him, I understand that, but I want somebody with the ability to be able to stand on the world stage and speak with authority, and that that what he's speaking is true. Now, you might not like it, and a lot of people didn't, and a lot of people didn't like the way that he handled things, but you compare him to what's going on now, and I can see Stephen Harper walk into a microphone and say, this is why I'm doing this, and these are the rules that govern it, and here's some historical context to it. I can see him doing that, but obviously Justin Trudeau is not up to it.
Okay. I'm sure we're going to have more to talk about on this subject in the coming weeks, Nick.
I have a feeling we're not done milking this cow.
No, but we have to go for a break, so we'll be back in a little while here on the Combat Zone.
Okay, welcome back to the Combat Zone, folks. I'm Nick, he's Joseph, and it's full speed ahead. Let's make them boilers pant and give them everything we got. Okay, next up.
I don't want the boilers to pant.
But that just means they're working really hard.
I'll betcha.
Yeah.
As long as they're just panting and not wheezing.
A little bit. I've seen them.
Wheezing boilers are a problem.
Well, I have seen a boiler actually pant and bounce on its feet, and that's not a fun thing. 550 pounds of steam pressure, 4 tons of water, and it starts to bounce. It gets your attention. Anyway, so let's keep it just a little below that. All right, so the next story on the list, I can see us having a lot of fun with this. The government has decided, let me give you the headline, that they are going to issue what can only be called the gay Loonie. All right, now you and I were having some fun with this before the show because... So what's next? What is the LGBT community going to say? And we came up with some rather interesting names. Do you remember them?
Well, the first thing was I thought that, at first I thought, well, that would be the toonie, right? The gay toonie.
No, that's for bisexuals.
But that's, so I figured that they'll probably have to mint a $3 coin and we'll call it the tweenie.
It's one of these stories where it's either laugh or cry because, look, Justin Trudeau's father, Trudeau 1.0, Pierre Trudeau, is very famous for the quote, and I'm just looking for it here now to make sure I get it exactly right.
The state has no place in the bedrooms of the nation.
That's it. And when his son is, all of a sudden now the state not only is deciding on things that should happen privately between two consenting adults, decided to make it an issue so big that they're going to change our currency. And here's just a description. Now, let me find it. I had it pulled up. And it's all about the crimes committed against those who are homosexual over the past since up to 1969 when the law was struck down. when it was no longer illegal to be a homosexual. Now, look, I don't care who people sleep with. That is not my concern. I have enough, on my own plate with my marriage and things like that. I don't care what other people do. That's their business. But the state has dragged it from the bedroom onto the street and have endorsed certain practices above others. And I think it's outrageous. Let's see. I'm really trying to find this. Where the heck did it go? The official apology, they're talking about this as part of the apology to the gay community. The official apology also came with a budget of $145 million, which includes $110 million for compensation for the LGBT former civil servants whose careers were sidelined or terminated because of their sexual choices, and $15 million for historical reconciliation, education, and memorialization efforts. Okay, so they're going to spend a lot of money on this. And what the part that I'm wondering about is why, are they going to have a heterosexual coin? Why is it just this particular group?
Well, that's of course the problem. Is it's really not a gay thing. It's really, this is symptomatic, I think, of the general sexualization of society as a whole, where what used to be considered in bad taste, the whole idea of pornography and bringing sexuality and overt sexuality out into the public realm. This is a relatively new thing. And of course, if you're going to have all of this in the public realm, then you're going to have all kinds of sexual practices that are going to come in, and they're going to compete for equal time or equality of status, if you will. And, why not, and I'm not advocating for this, but why not polygamy when you get right down to it? Well, what is the logical reason why polygamy should not be allowed in law? I mean, if everything else is, at some point in time, you have to sort of say, okay, enough is enough. So for me, the issue here is really not the law. The issue for me is I'm against overt homosexual demonstration of homosexual sex in the streets. I'm against the overt demonstration of heterosexual sex in the streets. I think, get a room, right? As the saying goes, get a room, guys. Take it into somewhere private and stuff like that. So your question, tongue in cheek, we're going to have a heterosexual a coin minted to celebrate heterosexual activity? No. We shouldn't have a coin minted to celebrate any sexual activity.
I couldn't agree with you more. And what's funny is this comes from a CBC story December 20th last year. So it's a little older, but some of the comments in it that you would expect a lot of support for this. Au contraire, at least according to the comments. And I'll just share a few of them. This guy called Larry says, "Mercy, mercy, the rainbow is growing. What is next? The Islam 2 shekel coin? The government, she be crazy." Todd says, 2020 will see the launch of the Death of Canada coin. Carl says, just 303 days, 12 hours, and 53 minutes till Justin and his gang of SJW liberal misfits are no longer in power over Canada and Canadians. Now, remember, this is the CBC. You would expect a lot more people going, well, it's all about fairness and it's all about equality and all that kind of nonsense. Mario says, give me a break. Larry says, I shouldn't use last names. Larry says, Mario Doucette, now we don. Oh, okay, I get it now. It's at Christmas, so he's going, now we don our blank apparel. Okay, sing that old Christmas song. Dave says, this is nothing more than state-engineered virtue signaling, and CBC is on it like a fat kid on a Smartie. It's amazing what hundreds of millions of taxpayers' dollars will buy. I'll just share one or two more here. Greg says you can call it the I'm sorry, this is and never will be worth more. And Brian says, and what will the new coin be called? So there's more, but you get the sense there aren't many people. I haven't seen one post on this website, and this has been up since December 30th, that supports this idea of a gay loony. It just isn't here. I'm sorry, I found one, David, and I'm not going to bother to read it because I just discovered it now, so I haven't had a chance to read it before I actually go through it, because you never know what you're going to find. Anyway, the point is, the vast majority of the people, even on CBC's own website, are against this.
Well, what I want to know is, how is it that a gay loony itself is not insulting to the gay community?
Yeah.
Like, why are we not putting this on the $5 bill?
Why is it just a loony?
Why? Well, especially the loony.
Oh, because the $5 bill would be for pansexuals.
Oh man, Nick, you are treading dangerously close to the line.
Well, the line's been removed. So how can you get close to it?
Now, somebody wrote about a virtual signaling,
Yep.
virtue signaling.
Yep, virtue signaling.
Is what you just said about the $5 bill? Is that like triggering?
It triggered me.
Is that a microaggression?
It triggered me.
Is that okay? We're not going there, Nick.
No, it didn't trigger me like that. No,
Okay.
no, it
Like
didn't.
what? This is a family.
We're
This is
leaving
a
that
family show,
conversation.
Nick.
Nope.
Okay.
Not going there. Nope.
Okay.
But
What's the difference between a macro trigger and a micro trigger? No, what's the difference between a macroaggression and a microaggression?
how hard you squeeze the trigger?
I'm being triggered now, Nick.
There you go. I don't know. Ask Jordan Peterson; he'll tell you.
I don't know if he really understands it either. Isn't Trigger somebody's horse?
Yeah, it was the Lone Ranger.
Was it Trigger was the Lone Ranger's horse?
I hope no, that was Silver. Trigger. Who was it? Gene Autry.
Was it Gene Autry?
Gene Autry and Trigger. How bad do you want to know?
You're going to look it up on the computer
Of
right now.
course.
Oh my goodness gracious! What is the world coming to? Anyway, I don't know why we're bothering with a new loony anyway.
Oh well,
Because we're going to be burning up, according to that congresswoman, whatever her name is, OAC or whatever. Okay, what is her name anyway? Does anyone know?
God,
I can't. Whatever her name is, 12 years. So that
Cortez.
means the rest of the world will be around in 12 years. But we will be gone in 6 because we are Canada. We are world leaders in global warming.
it's Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez.
Oh, it's AOC.
Yeah,
Alexandria.
Ortega Ocasio-Cortez. And this woman,
Alexandria
Yep.
Ocasio
Cortez.
Cortez.
Yes,
Okay.
her father was one of the dictators in one of the Central American countries.
Is that true?
I think so.
Okay, I don't know if we should be saying it if it's not true.
Well, let's just say, where did she come from? The Bronx, New York City, New York State. Okay, how old? What ethnicity? Where the heck is her Wikipedia? Here it is. There.
I don't know. All I know is she was talking about the world ending in 12 years or something
Yeah.
like that because of climate change or global warming or something like that. So what I want to know is, does that mean that Canada's going to be done in 6 years?
Well, we're heating up twice as fast, so that would make sense.
So should we be fleeing the country?
Well, you know something? Either that or we go. Here's what we'll do. We won't tell anybody. We'll take over the Diefenbunker. And we'll go and put 6 years of food stuffed away in the Diefenbunker.
That's a great There's a great question. Will the Diefenbunker survive
The end of the world.
the global warming catastrophe?
Well, it was designed to withstand somewhat of a nuclear fallout and so on. I don't know about a nuclear hit, but
I'm not doing that. No, Nick. No. You could do the Diefenbunker.
yeah.
I'm just getting in my car, driving down to Watertown. Okay. Listen, President Trump. Okay, you heard it here first. You better think carefully about. You're wasting your time building that wall in Mexico, along the Mexico border. It looks like you have a bigger problem coming to you from Canada. So if I were you guys down there in the States, man, I would be investing a lot more money right now building that wall to keep Canadians out.
Okay, I'm just reading her her bio here on, and this is wiki, so take it for what it's worth. But she is not the daughter of Central American.
It's a good thing we checked.
You're quite right. We got to be accurate, even when we're being, a little bit goofy. We got to be accurate.
little irreverent.
She was born in the Bronx on October 13th, 1989. Well, that tells you a lot. To her mother Blanca and her father Sergio. Let's see. She has a brother Gabriel. Her father's born in the Bronx to a Puerto Rican family. Blah blah blah. Okay, who cares? Anyway, she is about as nuts as they come. I can't imagine anybody who the New Green Deal. Remember that? She was the one who authored it. And
yeah, I've been hearing about it.
Yeah, when it went to the Senate for approval, it got crushed 57-0. Not one senator supported it. Not one. That tells you something. Even the Democrats thought it was a bad idea. Because she wanted to completely take every home in the United States and retrofit it. And that's only one of the crazy schemes she had. Can you imagine the cost? I have no idea how many households there are in the United States, but there's a lot, like probably in the hundreds of millions.
What kind of retrofit was she thinking about?
New installation, new windows, new doors, to make them more energy efficient. And
But what's the point if you're not going to be around 12 years from now?
Hey, listen, nobody ever said she made any sense. If you come up with a green energy, if you come up with this new Green Deal, you're loopy to begin with. The old deal under FDR didn't work the way that they thought it would. Even his minister for state of, the head secretary of state, or not, finance, I forget what the role, the office is called. But in 1939, he said it didn't work. It just didn't work. The Hoover Dam and all that major projects actually might have made the Depression even worse in the States.
Although the Hoover Dam is spectacular.
It is. Nobody's denying that. But it cost a lot more money than it should have. It didn't do what it didn't. The long-term benefits as far as employment and all that stuff just didn't happen. So anyway, and that's not the only project that they did.
Okay. The gay Loonie. I'm telling you guys, what's next? Don't answer that question. I do not want an answer to that question.
Yeah,
okay.
We'll find that out soon enough.
We'll find it out soon enough.
That's right.
So let's talk a little bit about next week, Nick.
Sure.
So we've got, staying on the whole climate change subject. We've got Tom Harris coming in or calling in or whatever. I'm not sure. From
from the International Client Science Coalition.
So Tom's really a world leader in the whole area of climate science and
we're really lucky to have him right here in Ottawa.
Yeah.
So he is one of the few people. Now he will readily admit that he is not a climate scientist. He has a degree in mechanical engineering, but he is also, well, let's put it this way. He's as qualified, if not more so, to speak on climate than David Suzuki or Al Gore ever will be. And he also has collected around him some real climate scientists, people like Dr. Tim Ball from the University of Winnipeg, as an example, who is an honest-to-goodness climate scientist who, would embarrass Bill Nye, the pervy guy, right off the stage if they ever sat down and went at each other. I mean, Bill's just a complete idiot when it comes to this kind of stuff. So we have him coming in next week, and we also have.
Yeah, we're trying to get Jim Carahelios from the Axe the Carbon Tax group to come on next week. Haven't heard back from him yet, but we're working on him, and hopefully he'll be a guest with us next week to talk about the carbon tax and what the various governments across the country are doing to fight it. Also, what different governments are doing in imposing as well, and what some of the implications are from this, more from a political, strategic angle than from an actual the economic side of things. Although he could speak to a certain degree to the economics of it.
Well, it doesn't take a rocket science to figure out the economics of it.
Well, it's there are differing opinions on that too, and that's the thing is there are a lot of people out there that are I don't try to say something here. I guess I have to say kooky.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
There are a lot of kooks out there.
Look,
in fairness, there are a lot of gullible people. And, we've talked about this before, Nick, and I even touched on it earlier in the show tonight. One of the big problems, of course, is that people have lost the ability to think critically about the issues or the items that are being put in front of them as matters of public policy. And when I say that they've lost the capacity to think critically, it's not that they can't think critically. It's that they don't have the tools to think critically effectively. So, I mean, you have to have a basic understanding of science. You have to have a basic understanding of history, a basic understanding of geography. The whole notion that Canada is warming at twice the rate as the rest of the globe is on its face. If you have the slightest clue about geography, is simply implausible. Okay.
It's ridiculous.
It's absurd.
Yes.
So, So it's just you have to have a sense of history. The same thing comes into play with when we were talking about the SNC-Lavelin affair, and what I was talking about in terms of the history of the relationship between the political element of our government and the legislative and the executive and the judicial. While they all enjoy a certain amount of independence, that doesn't mean that they're entirely independent of one another. Okay, and and if people understood that, then they'd be a little more circumspect about what's been going on with that particular affair. If people had a little bit more understanding of scientific knowledge and how science works, they'd be a little more circumspect about the claims about man-made global warming, man-made climate change. They'd be a little more circumspect about the allegations that are being made about history. And, in this country.
Well, it wouldn't be so easy to revise it.
It would not be so. I'm sorry, I missed that. It would be.
It would not be so easy to revise it. I'm referring to.
Well, I see what you're saying. Yeah, on everything. Okay.
Yeah.
If you had a little bit more knowledge of things, basic knowledge, then you'd be able to apply your critical thinking skills more effectively.
Because you'd have some frame of reference.
Exactly. So it's when I say people have lost their capacity to think critically, I'm not saying that they can't think. I'm saying that they don't have, as you say, a frame of reference within which to assess the validity of the claims that are being put before them.
Well, one of the things we've done in our education system, which I think is a huge tragedy, is we've moved courses based on logic. Like there used to be a course you could take called Logic, and it taught you how to think from a critical point of view. Not that you criticize everything, but that you compare what you're being told to things like basic science. You don't have the common refrain you see in the global warming debates now is, oh, yeah, but you're not a climate scientist. I don't have to be. It's up to the climate scientist to explain it in language that we understand. But more than that, I also have to have a basic understanding of how science works, even if I don't know the minutia of any particular field of science. It's like understanding photosynthesis. Photosynthesis is a great leg up on understanding this whole process.
Well, I came across a number this morning when I was reading up on the climate report,
right?
That we've been talking about, and in this particular article, they made the allegation, and I don't recall the exact context, but the number that they came up with was something like 3.17 degrees Celsius, okay?
Right.
And I'm thinking to myself, 3.17 degrees Celsius, now you're talking about measuring temperature not just in tenths of degrees, but hundredths of
That's
degrees. Right. The problem is that you come up with that number as the result of a calculation, and the calculation, the data that you're putting into the calculation are not, they're full degrees. They're not fractions of degrees. And here's a fundamental thing, okay? If folks, if you don't get anything else from tonight's show, take this with you, okay? Okay. The data, the calculated data, okay, the output of any kind of a calculation using data cannot be more accurate than the data that went into the calculation in the first place. So you cannot have hundredths of degrees, okay? And in basic math, we used to call that significant digits.
That's right.
Okay?
I remember that.
You cannot the measurement that is the result of an analysis of data can never be more accurate than the data that went into the calculation in the first place.
Well, it's situations like that because we haven't been teaching mathematics and critical thinking to what I would call an acceptable standard is why they get away with so much of this stuff. And call me a conspiracy theorist if you want, but I think it's on purpose. Because if you're going to sell these ideas, the first thing you have to have is people who are listening to you who cannot really hold you to task for your information. And I think that's by design.
Okay, well, we are reaching the top of the hour here, Nick. It's been a great show. Thanks to Ron Barr, our special guest tonight, and to everybody that participated in the chat room, and our callers tonight, too. We were very happy to have had you. What do I have to say now? We have to come up with some sort of a special closing, right?
Have you got something in mind?
No, I don't have anything
I was
in
waiting.
mind.
I was thought you were going to hit the play button.
If you like, tell people about the show, guys. If you like what you hear, consider making a small donation. And I was going to say something else. And support our sponsors.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Go to rushcreekwines.com.
And we will see you again next week.
You bet.
Here in the
enemy only has
zone.
4 things to say. Good night. God bless. And we'll see you all next week.
Okay.